Sunday Surefire podcast. I'm your host, the commish. Joining me today is the co-host, Aaron Downtown Brown,
Hey, hey,
and the other co-host, Ethan Weaver.
Kamish, how we doing?
We are doing great, boys. Doing great. We are beginning our annual road trip around the country where we check in on each and every division around the NFL. We typically start out west, so we're going to keep that theme going with you here. We're going to be starting with Aaron's favorite division. We're going to be out in the AFC West, where the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs reside.
Ooh.
woo!
That's usually where Aaron comes in with his tomahawk chop.
Oh, that's right. I'm late. I'm late.
Tells
I'm
us
not
how
in
Oh, come on. That
just
was your cue, Aaron. Come
football
on.
season yet.
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
just reminds us how ignorant the people of Kansas City still are. But we'll let him slide on that one as he's celebrating a back-to-back Super Bowl championship, something Ethan and I know very well about as Patriots fans. But we're not here to talk about real football or Super Bowls or any of that stuff. We're here to talk about some of the key players in these divisions. We're talking studs, the high-profile names that you know of. We're going to touch on those guys quickly, just kind of reference who they are, where they're going right now in Fantasy Pros average draft position at this point in the offseason. And we'll just talk real quick. If we're in on those guys at that price tag or out on them, we're going to be using a 1 QB half PPR scoring format to do that. We'll talk some sleepers as well. We'll talk some bust candidates, guys that we might like them as players, but we don't necessarily think that they're going to return the requisite value that you have to give up to get them on your teams in redraft formats. And we'll also, we always love our dynasty content around here at Sunday Surefire. We'll also touch on a couple of dynasty sleepers that we think kind of fit the mold of guys that you want to keep on your roster for maybe later in 2024, if not even for 2025. So these are guys that are going to be relatively affordable to get in your dynasty leagues that you're hanging on to in a taxi squad or at the end of their bench and hoping someday they'll pan out. But let's start with the big names here, the big ticket items out in the AFC West. The first guy on the list here is a quarterback. Most of the guys we're going to talk about here are going to be position players in the top 24 on that Fantasy Pros rankings, but you got to make an exception for a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who isn't going to go in the first two rounds of a 1 QB league, but at ADP 40, so the middle of round four. What do you guys think about this? We'll start with you, Aaron. It's your team. What do you think about Mahomes going 40th in ADP?
Yeah, I think round four. I mean, traditionally with a redraft league, we're not as crazy with quarterbacks, but I think Mahomes, he's top tier for a reason. I think, with the kind of rebalanced offense, where Kadarius Toney is not the leading wide receiver coming into camp this year. I think they're kind of in for a better season. Mahomes just thrown over 4,000 yards last year, just kind of mediocre for him. I think he's due for another 5,000 yard season here coming up. So I'm ready. Andy Reid said they're going to be going long a lot, so I think they're going to be a little more explosive than they were in 2023.
Ethan, are you in on a jump back up to stardom for Mahomes from a fantasy standpoint in 2024?
I am. Even though I usually like to wait on quarterback and redraft, it is nice to get Mahomes in the middle of the fourth round. To get Mahomes on your team, you usually need to draft him a little earlier than that in recent years. But I do think Mahomes is in for a potential QB1 overall season, especially in more so in 6 points per passing touchdown leagues. But I love what they did in the offseason. They brought in Hollywood Brown, which I'm pretty high on. Hopefully, Rashee Rice doesn't get suspended too long, but I thought he was a target hog, and last year as a rookie, I thought he developed very good chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. So I am very high on Rashee Rice once he's back in the field. You get a guy like Xavier Worthy, obviously Travis Kelce, the league's best fantasy tight end over the past many seasons. So I think they're primed for a very good year, and I think Mahomes is primed for a bounce back year fantasy wise.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to that. I'm also in on it. We'll make it a clean sweep right out of the gate. They just have a revamped offense and from a weapons standpoint for all the guys Ethan touched on. And in the middle of round four, I'm also a guy who likes to wait on quarterback. But if that's where he's going to be when it actually comes time to press the button 6 or so weeks from now, I'm going to have a really hard time not getting a bunch of shares of him in redraft this year. Even though I like to wait on quarterback, like I said. So The next guy we're going to talk about is Devontae Adams. His ADP is 15, so the early going in the second round. Aaron, we'll just toss it back to you, man. What do you think about Adams at that price point?
Uh, I think I'm out on Adams. I mean, I think just overall not really in with the Raiders offense, being one of the bottom offenses of the league last year. Not a whole lot of new heads going on from as far as coaching scheme and players. So I'm pretty much out on Adams. I know he ended up being wide receiver 11 last year, but his consistency just really sucked last year where he had a couple big games, but I think when you look at overall points, made you happy, but if you need him to be your alpha every week, I think he definitely let you down in that offense last year.
Yeah, Adams at 15. He is going to be your second player off the board. I believe at the 9 spot there, the people who are drafting at the 109. So he could be your wide receiver 2 on your team, which there's probably nobody safer than a guy like Devontae Adams. I am a little concerned that he is getting longer in the tooth. And as Aaron alluded to, that offense probably isn't going to be very explosive. I'm sure we'll touch on Adams a little later in this episode, but I just want to touch on, I guess, the quote unquote studs in the AFC West. It's kind of crazy. Just a few short years ago, back in 2022, when Russell Wilson came to town to the Denver Broncos, everybody thought this division was going to take the league by storm, and that just wasn't the case. Now, just looking at a redraft perspective, looking at the top 50 picks, there's only 4 players from this division that are in this top 50. It's Adams at 15, Kelsey at 34, Pacheco at 38, and then Mahomes, which we just touched upon, at 40. So it's kind of crazy how the mighty have fallen fantasy wise. There's I guess more lower level sleeper type players in this division than there are studs.
That's definitely the case. I remember recording episodes 2 years ago on this podcast talking about how the West was going to be just insane and how every week was going to be a shootout and how we had to get as many guys as we could on our teams from this division. And I bet if we go back, we'll probably see some not so great takes from a couple of years ago. But
We forget about those.
yeah, we'll just bury those like it never happens. What else would we possibly do? But there is one other guy we should talk about if we're talking about studs here in the AFC West. I know he's not in the top 24 anymore, but he's a guy who frequented that range of redrafts for a long time. That's Travis Kelce. Ethan, are you in on Travis Kelce where he's going in drafts? Do you think you're going to have many shares of him at his current position?
At ADP 34, back end of the third round. In previous seasons, you'd say that's a steal for Travis Kelce as he's been a first round pick over the past couple of years in many of the leagues I play in. But I think in his current state, I think I'm out at pick 34. I think I'd rather just punt the tight end position in the third round and just get some value later. So I think I'm out at that cost.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you on that. It's tough to see the great players that you have of the past kind of start to fade out. And I think at 35 years old this season, I think Kelsey's definitely in line for that. Aaron, I know you're our resident Kansas City Chiefs fan. You probably have Kelsey footy pajamas that you're wearing right now, if we could see. But we'll let you have your 2 cents on him real fast before we move on to our bust candidates.
Yeah, just quickly on Kelsey, I think if you were a fantasy owner that drafted a Kelsey in the third round before, I don't think much has changed. I don't, for me, I'm not worrying about his age. If you look at Laporta's points per game last year and Kelsey's points per game, they're pretty much right on par. And then we saw what he did in the playoffs. So yeah, I don't have an issue with Kelsey in the third round if you're one of those guys that want to leg up at the tight end position.
Yeah, personally, I'm just not a guy who likes taking tight ends too early in drafts, but that's more or less just kind of just a core way I build my teams in redraft formats. But like I said, we're gonna be talking busts here, and with these guys, like we said, it's not necessarily guys that we hate or anything. I mean, some of these guys are good players. We just don't think they're gonna live up to their high draft cost. And we were talking about Kelsey a second ago, Ethan. So why is he your bust? Is there anything that you have to add on that?
Yeah, he is getting older, as we know, and his usage over the past few seasons has dwindled slightly. I don't believe he plays many first down snaps anymore. And Aaron alluded to the playoffs last year, the actual NFL playoffs, and Kelsey kind of took back that 80% plus snap share role because, hey, it's the playoffs, I mean, win or go home. But I don't think that's a mentality that he or the team are going to have for him in the regular season, because they're going to make the playoffs. Their goal is to win a third straight Super Bowl. So I think they're going to make sure Kelsey is healthy going into the playoffs. And just looking at last year, he missed week 1 due to a knee bruise that he suffered in practice, and then he was the tight end 1 through weeks 1 through 9, which was obviously great. But then the last 8 games down the stretch, he was tight end 7, and with the tight end position, tight end 7 isn't going to win you many leagues. I know I had a share of Kelsey last year, and I normally don't get too many shares of Kelsey, and he definitely wasn't a difference maker for where I had to draft him. And I don't think it's going to get better going forward as he is getting older. So I'm okay passing up on Kelsey in the 3rd round when I can get, I mean, a Trey McBride at 44. You can get Dalton Kincaid at 52 overall. Even a guy Evan Ingram at pick 68. There's just a ton of value, in my opinion, at the tight end position. Even a guy like Jake Ferguson at pick 87. We know Dak loves throwing to the tight end. So to me, I'd rather not get a guy like Travis Kelsey with that risk with the age cliff coming, and the risk that the Kansas City Chiefs are so focused on their deep playoff run, that they may ease Kelsey even more this year. So that's just a risk that I'm willing to pass up on in the 3rd round.
I'm with you on that. I think Kelsey's almost at a stage from a real football standpoint where you gotta kind of treat him like a Lamborghini, like a nice car that you keep in the garage until it's perfect conditions out. The weather's nice. You can just get out there, go for a joyride, and it's great when you're in it. And Kelsey will have some great moments this year, no doubt about that. But I think he's almost at that stage where like Ethan said, they have the long term in mind, and they don't necessarily need to pepper him with 12 targets in week 5. And that's all well and good. You'll have your moments, but like there's also going to be times where he has 5 targets in a game, especially now that Kansas City has additional receiving options that they can focus on with guys like Worthy and Hollywood Brown there, and obviously Rice hopefully making another step where he can be more than just that kind of guy you're throwing a screen pass to make miss. So there's probably development coming for him too. So I guess a lot of things are kind of lining up against Kelsey, and I don't think he can necessarily come back to where he once was, which is I mean, unrealistic anyway, given how amazing he's been for fantasy purposes. Aaron, I guess we'll give you the last word on your boy Kelsey.
Yeah, just a couple things. A lot of people forget on his downturn last year that he also played through an ankle injury. So I think that played a little bit into his lower snap percentage than usual. So I think babysitting his knee injury, playing through the ankle sprain, I think did definitely take a dip a little bit. But as I said, he's still paced for the exact same points per game as Sam Laporta, who finished tight end 1. So I think Kelsey on a down year of injuries in a Chiefs offense that was a little bit unusual than what we know of in the past. I think, if you are staring at Kelsey and he's dropping an ADP and he drops around or something, I would definitely steal him at that point. But like I said earlier, with Commissioner and I both saying, we're not usually the guys that take the early tight end pick anyway. But I think if he drops and you can tell other league members are scared to take him, I this year would not hesitate to take him if he does drop some.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get it. It's tough not to hit the button. Ethan, anything else you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say you touched on the injuries, but you don't get healthier with age typically. So I think you're going to see more of these pop up. He had his fewest receiving yards since 2015 last year. And I guess you can use the added competition per se with Hollywood, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice taking a step. You could look at that, I think, both ways. You could look at it as a negative because of target competition, or you can look at it as a positive where the defense actually has to worry about other pieces other than just Travis Kelsey. We saw Travis Kelsey last year where he's just getting basically mugged by 2 people and essentially just almost quit on the route because there was nothing he could do. His job was essentially to take double coverage. So you can look at it both ways. I still think Kelsey is a hell of a player. I think he's going to be fine in fantasy this year. I just don't want to be the one taking Kelsey in the 3rd round and see the age cliff it come to fruition when I'm trying to win a championship.
Yeah, that'd be tough if that were to happen to you. For my bust, I'm going to be going to another older player, that's Devontae Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. He's going ADP 15, so the early part of the second round. And I'm just out on him at this price point here. I'm just not dying to get my hands on pieces of this offense in the first 2 rounds of my drafts. I mean, Adams is coming off a WR11 overall finish, which isn't bad in theory. But he was playing football with guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell, and those guys didn't inspire much confidence. And fast forward to 2024, guys like Aiden O'Connell still there, and Gardner Minshew. I'm still not all that inspired to go ahead and get shares of Devontae Adams on my fantasy roster. And while I do think he's talented, and I think his game will age well just based on his route running techniques and how good he is in those areas, I just I just think this area of the draft is a little bit rich for my blood, even though the volume could be there. It just with this with what he finished last year, say it's a carbon copy of that. I mean, it's a back end WR1 finish. If I draft a back end WR1 in the early part of round two, like that's not good value. Like, yeah, sure, it's a top 12 finish. That's great. But how many guys won your league last year because you had Devontae Adams in the second round? I know I took Devontae Adams in round two in redraft leagues last year, and my team was, I actually went zero RB. I punted the position entirely. I took nothing but receivers my first 3 rounds. I picked the right guys on the back end, like Rashad White, David Montgomery, a couple other good players later to fill in. I picked the right running backs later, and I still didn't make the playoffs because guys like Adams didn't pull their weight in round two for me. So I like Adams as a player. I loved him in Green Bay. He was great 2 years ago with McDaniels, but as much as we want to hate on Josh McDaniels, I'm not sure that Antonio Pierce is going to be the guy to unlock fantasy greatness for Devontae Adams as he's enters his age 32 season when he turns that in December.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with Adams. I'm on board as to say I'd rather pass up on him in the early part of the second round. I did mention that I think he is a very safe pick considering there's not much competition. With the Raiders depth chart here, you have Adams, you have Myers, Trey Tucker, and Michael Gallup. I mean, where I say there's safety is because he's going to get just absolutely peppered with targets. He's coming off a year where he had 175 targets, which is number 2 in the league. Um, he was number 3 in the league in air yards, number 1 in the league in air yard share, number 2 in target rate, number 3 in snap share. So he was on the field almost every snap, and he was getting looks like crazy, and he still finished as a back end wide receiver 1.
There you go.
So yeah, exactly. So I don't see those targets going up. I mean, you can barely get a better snap share and target share. So and he's getting older, right? So he had 15.6 fantasy points per game last year, which was number 15 overall. So I think at that price point, I think you're drafting him at his ceiling, per se. So in that regard, I'm out.
Yeah, not a whole lot more to add on Adams. I think you guys nailed it where I mean, I think Pierce last year kind of gave out a pretty big tell where if he became the coach, which he did, he mentioned, a lot of their keys to success was really just pounding the rock, a lot of, just grinding games. That doesn't really, spell just pass happy offense. So I do think it's another, as we mentioned, just lower ranked offense in 2024. And I really don't want a wide receiver in one of the lowest ranked offenses in the league.
Yep, clean sweep out of the gate there for busts. I guess, Aaron, we've got one more bust to touch on here. Who do you got for us in the AFC West that's not going to live up to their ADP this season?
That's right. So not exactly the same route that you guys went where you guys mentioned, previous studs in this category. So love the discussion here. I went a little bit lower in or higher in ADP or lower, however you want to look at it. It's ADP 86. This is Lad McConkey. So this is a guy I know we've hyped up a lot in the offseason, and a guy that I've liked in Dynasty, and I think he's got a good chance to turn out well. But when I really look at ADP 86, that's pretty much saying you want him being a every week starter for you, right? And I think we hope and we think that he's going to claim targets this year in this Chargers offense, but really what does that translate being, right? I think just looking at, just the risk at this point in the season or actually preseason to say, okay, is he going to be the target hog in that offense? But on top of it, he's entering a Greg Roman offense, which we've talked off in the off season as well, which really, what does that translate being a number one receiver in that offense where, you take like Hollywood Brown, for example, is one good year with the Ravens where he barely eclipsed 1,000 yards in that season in 2019, right? That was Hollywood Brown's second year, which we also know that rookies traditionally do better in their second year, right? So McConkey, as a rookie, I think if you I think he's got the obvious learning curves there for year one receiver. And then I guess another just main point, this is really what I steered towards more with this pick is what happened to Josh Palmer, right? And the answer is really nothing, right? Like the Chargers lost Keenan Allen, obviously the departure of Mike Williams and his injury last year, and it was really Josh Palmer that stepped up with the Mike Williams injury last year. Obviously, we know what the kind of season Keenan Allen had, having over 150 targets. But with him claiming those many targets last year, Palmer was still demanding about 7 to 10 targets per game when healthy, right? We do know that he had an injury as well. So, I think just given the fact that Palmer is a familiar face to Herbert entering this season, I don't think we can forget that where he's really the only returning wide receiver that pretty much had played every down, had the 60-40 split from, where he lined up at the slot or out wide. And, we always talk about ADP and where these guys in this range with McConkey, you're missing out on guys like our boy Christian Watson, where we find ways to keep bringing up his name, JSN, Cortland Sutton, some guys that are a little bit more proven, or we've seen that potential. And as mentioned, just Josh Palmer, you can get him 32 picks later, which there's a potential they could have similar, if not better, stats with Palmer this year. So my bust is McConkey at ADP 86.
That's an interesting one on my side because I actually have Lab McConkey as my sleeper at ADP 86. So I guess we'll just morph the conversation from the bust to the sleeper category on that note right there. And I mean, we've talked a lot about Josh Palmer, and he's still there and all that, but who isn't there anymore is the front office and the coach who drafted Josh Palmer and who put him on the field in years past. So I think that him being kind of the lone survivor of the Chargers 2023, pass catching groups really doesn't mean all that much to me. I mean, I know QJ was also a first round pick, Quentin Johnson, that is, but I mean, there's no loyalty to any of these guys at this point. I mean, Lad McConkey is very much this regime's guy. Like it's not any of the other guys that are there. We know that for sure. But and I think you kind of look at the situation. Aaron mentioned that he doesn't necessarily want to draft him to be a starter, and I think in round 8 you don't necessarily have to draft Lad McConkey to be a starting receiver for you, unless you're in some format where you have like 3 or 4 flex spots or 3+ receiver spots. I think this is a range where you could very realistically load up on your running backs and receivers, and maybe punt on quarterback or tight end. And in that format, you're getting enough back to use McConkey as a depth piece, a guy you don't have to rely on from day one. And you kind of buy yourself some time with some other players a little bit later in the draft too, if you had to toss into a flex spot. Well, you give Lad some time to pan out and hopefully give you that push down towards the second half of the season. So I don't think he necessarily has to be that. And they've talked up this offense a ton as being like establish the run, ground and pound, and all that. But for that to be the case, you have to have a good defense to continually be able to run the ball over and over again. This Chargers defense last year was 23rd in the league in points per game allowed. And they didn't really do a ton in my eyes to get better on that side of the ball. So their first 2 picks, of course, being on offense doesn't help that. So, I look at the situation where, like, yeah, they're gonna run, they're gonna want to run early, but when they can't, what are they gonna do? They're gonna go to their high priced quarterback and they're gonna sling the rock around. So that's where I fall in on Lad. I think he's a good enough value for me here in the early part of round 8 to feel confident here, especially if I could toss him into a bench spot here, and hell, even if it's my last flex, I'm still hitting the button and seeing living with the results for what I get in 2024.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kamish. I'm very high on Lad McConkey. And as you said, you can draft Lad at pick 86 and let him sit on your bench for the first few weeks as he gets warmed up to the NFL because you're probably going to draft maybe some other other guys down the line that you can plug into your lineup. I mean, the guys like even like Cortland Sutton are going a few rounds later. So there's a guy, a veteran that you can put into your lineup while Lad gets adjusted. But the thing I like about drafting these rookies in eighth round or later is you just have immense upside, and upside wins you championships. I mean, for everybody that drafted guys like AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, these rookies that kind of take off, and I'm not saying Lad McConkey is Jefferson or is AJ Brown, but these rookies do have immense upside when they do hit because you are getting them later. And I think Lad has a very real possibility to lead this team in receptions. By all accounts, he's going to be playing the slot. There are, I mean, the rumblings out of the Chargers are they are going to still throw the ball. I know everybody's saying they're just going to ground and pound with Harbaugh and Greg Roman, but with Greg Roman, I mean, he had Lamar Jackson and some okay pieces at the wide receiver position, and the Ravens wanted to run the football. You go from Lamar Jackson to Justin Herbert. I don't think it's just a one for one. Hey, we're gonna just run the rock and not use a guy like Justin Herbert. So I like Lad McConkey. I'm willing to press the button in the eighth round, and I just like the upside there. I think he has a chance, a really real possibility to be the Chargers' number one wide receiver this year.
Aaron, any rebuttals to any of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think at the end of the day, things to remember is like, remember that. So Ravens offense, they also had Mark Andrews, right? I mean, if you compare an alternative option in the passing game, it's Hayden Hurst, right? So I think Hurst is not a Mark Andrews to where I guess my point is I feel like Josh Palmer, knowing that he can line up on the outside and the slot position, I think there's a world where they can have close to 800 and 900 yards each, and possibly the Chargers could have no 1,000-yard receivers. And if you can get Palmer 32 picks later for similar stats, um, I'd almost go that route. I guess that's more my thinking there. Dynasty, I love the guy with McConkey, but I talked myself into more, I guess, liking Palmer more.
Oh, I can see that. I can see that. But we'll see how that unfolds. It's an interesting guy that I know we've talked to him a decent amount in our dynasty shows. So we'll see how he pans out as a rookie in 2024 in this revamped offense. But Aaron, tell us who you're sleeping on. Who's gonna surprise some people this season?
Yeah, this is actually nice segue. So we're talking a lot of Chargers beginning of this episode here, and my sleeper is going to be J.K. Dobbins. So he's at ADP 157. All right. So one thing about J.K. Dobbins is he's getting drafted after Gus Edwards, right? We're talking a lot about this Greg Roman offense where, if you remember a few years ago, this is the exact same tandem that Baltimore used, right? Where they had almost as many rushing yards as passing yards, right? So, in that lineup, when it was JK versus Gus Edwards, JK obviously was the number one running back. I know he's on an uphill battle, returning from injury. So I think the sneaky take here is, I think he's got a chance to emerge as the number one. Maybe not week one. There's obviously going to be a little bit more of a snap share over there as well. But we already know we already know what Gus can do in the receiving game, which is not much. So I think JK is going to be the third down option coming out the gates. And I think if he has enough flashy plays as the season goes on, he can claim that number one spot. So I think he's a really sneaky guy if he can make that turnaround from his injuries to reclaim that spot and be a league winner coming towards the end of the season.
Ethan, for the fifth year in a row with J.K. Dobbins, is this the time he comes back to us and says, "I'm finally going to live up to my early draft pedigree from the 2020 dynasty drafts?
No, I don't think so. He, unfortunately for JK, he just had a tough career with injuries, and those injuries are starting to pile up like crazy. So I just don't think he's the same player anymore. Um, so obviously at that price, why not take a flyer? But um, in terms of that backfield, there's another player that I'm going to talk about as my sleeper very shortly here.
Well, just do it
Uh,
then. Start talking about Vidal. Tell us
okay.
why you like him so much.
He is not my sleeper. I'm actually going to go
Ooh.
the starting running back there, and this is purely based on ADP. We are talking half point two, so the pass catching is a little hindered here. But I'm going to go Gus Gus Edwards. I just think for a redraft perspective, you're getting a starting running back on a team that everybody says they're gonna run the ball like crazy. You're getting them in the beginning of the 11th round, pick 124. I'm sure that ADP is gonna rise, but right now, I mean, if you're getting a guy like Gus Edwards in the 11th round, that's a guy. I mean, I would like to add to my redraft team. Uh, the beat reporters are saying he's a clear RB1 in LA. I still believe the Chargers are gonna have a good offense. They're gonna run the ball. I think he's gonna get the majority of those first and second down touches, and I think he's gonna get the majority of goal line touches. He scored 13 touchdowns last year, which was good for fourth in the league. He's coming off an RB21 season, half point PPR. So I just think in the 11th round, if you can get a guy with that kind of touchdown upside, you plug him into your last flex, and he scores a touchdown for you. I mean, that's a good week right there. Coming from Baltimore, when he was on the field, looking at the opposing defense, there was an average of 7.2 defenders in the box, which was number two in the league. And he faced a stacked front carry rate of 36.9%, which was good for number two in the league as well. And that's obviously with Lamar Jackson in the backfield. But everybody was keyed in on the run in Baltimore, and he still put up very solid numbers. Now you have Justin Herbert at the helm. I think they're going to try to air it out more than what the Baltimore Ravens like to do. So I think that's going to lead to more openings for Gus Edwards. So I think in the 11th round, I'd be happy to take Gus Edwards, the starting running back in LA.
Aaron, you like Dobbins and Ethan likes Gus Edwards. Why is Ethan wrong?
Well, like I said, I think history repeats itself. They've competed against each other before. JK was at number one. I mean, all
That's
the
when he had that's
reports
when he had knees, Aaron.
when he had knees, right, right. I mean, obviously he's gonna say he feels 100%. I mean, he's had a lot of time off, as we know, but I mean, I think we're talking sleepers here. I think I look for guys that have potential to, really catch on midseason. I think, maybe it's not week one, week two, but as I said, Gus Edwards is not that third down back. And I think if when the Chargers see, Dobbins has something left, if that's the case, they're gonna start using him a lot more when they realize they can use him in, not just the passing game. So I know there's a lot of, rookie fever with Vidal out there too, but I don't. They're not going to switch to the third, third running back in that depth chart, without that injury. So, like I said, they've went up against each other before, and Dobbins, Greg Roman went with Dobbins. So, say if he can get over those injuries, I think he's still the number one if he can prove himself there.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting backfield to monitor between the two veterans and the rookie in the mix to see how it pans out. Hopefully, for fantasy purposes, it doesn't turn into just an ugly three-way split where we can't ever get it pinned down from week to week. That's the worst possible outcome. But I think both guys have an ADP late enough where you can take your shot on whoever you like better, and it's not going to kill you either way. But let's round into here to some guys that we want to take shots on later in drafts or kind of find ways to get on our dynasty rosters here. If we're going to talk to our dynasty stash candidates. For these ones, we're using the Fantasy Pros Dynasty and Keeper rankings to give you these guys kind of where they're going right now. For this one, I'm going to start. I usually like to go running back in these categories, but I'm going with a wide receiver to start out here. I'm going with Marvin Mims, who is number 153, so very, very inexpensive young player to get on your hands that you can get on your dynasty roster. He's Plays for the Denver Broncos. I know they're kind of a rebuilding situation. I don't really expect big things out of their offense here, but I am a little bit intrigued by Mims. He was the first player selected in the Sean Payton era last season, and he was essentially invisible on offense as a rookie in 2023. But he was actually a second team All Pro kick returner, which a lot of people don't know about him. So I think he's a guy that the Broncos could look at and say, okay, like let's just find a way to get the ball out of our rookie quarterback, being Bo Nix, get the ball out of his hands and just kind of give him an outlet to just kind of keep our offense, get it moving. And I think that can kind of play into Mibbs' hands. I mean, if you look at Nix as a passer last season, almost 40% of his passes were thrown fewer than 10 yards down the field. So simplifying the game plan for him in the early going is probably the way to do that. I think Sean Payton is one of the more overrated head coaches in our lifetime, but I think he's smart enough to know that he has a rookie quarterback, mid first round pick type of guy on his hands, and that he has to kind of treat him with kid gloves early. I think Mims could be a guy who maybe he's not like an every week starter for you, but if you can get him on the cheap and he flashes a little bit, maybe he becomes an interesting sell candidate. You can flip it from a little bit more value and help. Maybe even he does develop, gets a little bit better and fights for that second receiver spot in the Denver Broncos offense as early as this season.
I don't hate that call for a dynasty stash. He's a guy going to year two that may be able to make a jump in a depth chart that doesn't have a ton of talent. I do think Cortland Sutton and Josh Reynolds right now are probably locked in at the wide receiver 1 and 2 going into camp. And Mims has to battle with rookie Troy Franklin and Tim Patrick's coming back from injury. So it'll be interesting to see, but I definitely think it's definitely a good call. I was actually thinking Mims just because of the situation he's in. He's going into year two, and I know people were very high on him as a rookie, and I think that's a great point that you made. That was the first pick in the Sean Payton era, and they didn't have a ton of picks, so that definitely tells you something.
It sure does. Now I want you to tell us something, Ethan. Tell us who you're stashing deep on your bench in dynasty formats.
I'm gonna stay with the Denver Broncos. This is kind of just a deep dive, kind of bottom of the barrel, and it just kind of has to do with the situation that is the running back position in Denver. I'm gonna go with Audric Estime. Again, Sean Payton took this guy in the 5th round. Uh, I think he fell a lot in dynasty managers' minds because he ran that 4.71 at the combine. He did make up for it by the all-telling Pro Day 40, which was a 4.58. But outside that 40-yard dash, I mean, Audric Estime put up a very good career at Notre Dame. Good size, 5'11", 221, 87th percentile burst, and PFF graded him as the number 2 running back in the country. So I think the guy does have talent. And if you just look at the depth chart, Javonte Williams, I mean, there's reports all over the place. There's reports that he might not make the team. There's reports that he needs to earn his starting spot. So if Javonte Williams is getting pushed, I mean, who's going to push him? The Denver Broncos can save $3 million against the cap this year by cutting Samaje Perine. So I think that's a very realistic outcome for him. Jaleel McLaughlin, he came on last year as an undrafted rookie, but he's 5'8", 187. He's change of pace. He's not going to get a ton of touches. And then you have Audric Estime, who's a bigger body back that can handle a bunch of touches, drafted in the 5th round by Sean Payton. So I think if I'm going to stash a guy late, I think Audric Estime isn't a bad bet at 199 RB 58. So he's essentially free.
He is essentially free for sure. I mean, a couple of both Denver guys we talked about are pretty close to free at the moment, Aaron. I guess give me your thoughts on those two guys quickly, and then let us close this out here, letting us know who your dynasty stash candidate is.
Yeah, I think with Mims, I think, one advice there is I've had a couple different drafts where, I'm eyeing him as well. And I think a lot of fantasy managers see like him down the list and he does get grabbed. So I think a lot of people want to take shots with Mims with that logic. So I'm not gonna hate it. I just say beware. Like if you feel you want him in that round, it's the right time. Don't be afraid to grab him a few picks earlier because I have seen him picked a little bit earlier than what I was expecting. And then with Estime, I think that's a good call there. I think because even if Javonte Williams has a good year as a fantasy running back, it doesn't really translate to real football, right? And I think, we're talking this division. I think we all know most we all know Chiefs pretty much are going to win the division, looking, barring any crazy events happening. But really, I think the big thing is who comes in second place. And I think with Denver, um, where, are they struggling, or are they going to want to kind of turn over new leaves and kind of reset rosters? It, probably doesn't make sense to re-up on Javante. McLaughlin, I do like, but I do agree he's probably a third down back in the future. So I think solid pick there with Estime as a stash at running back, which we know we like doing here at Sunday Surefire with these getting down and dirty, finding these running backs on these teams.
Yeah, I felt like Kamani Vidal was an obvious choice for stash, but we talked enough Chargers running back, so I had to go in another direction.
There you go. Well, I'm gonna stick on this theory here. I'm gonna go to my team. Gonna go with the Chiefs
No
player
way.
here. I know, who would have thought here. Hey, I brought up a lot of Chargers today, but for my stash candidate, I'm gonna bring up Luis Reese Zamet. All right. So I think if you're a you play on the sleeper app, you've seen his name trending. You're like, who the heck is this guy, right? I guess I can claim I grabbed a lot of shares with him before that trend. But a little bit of background with him. He's a rugby star, right? So he's done pretty much everything he wanted to do in rugby. Um, and the interesting part about it, he's not just like I said, a local Joe off the streets, right? So the Chiefs are really actually giving him a big chance. They signed a three-year deal with Zamet, worth about just over $2 million, where he's not just this practice squad player, right? They really see what he's got with his athletic capability. I mean, it's funny. He's already top five in jersey sales in all the NFL, right? Where he's never even had a down or yet. So it's nuts. But when you kind of look at his measurables, he's 6'2", 210, 440. Shifty as all hell, right? But I think when you look at the Chiefs, we kind of look at what Andy Reid likes to do, and I think looking ahead in future years, they got to kind of, we know the CEH experiment, but we also know what McKinnon did in that role where, that third down running back, but as before Pacheco really emerged, and even with Pacheco, I think Zamet, being at the running back position has a really good chance fit, having those 3 years to kind of sit under that offense and kind of learn it. I'm kind of looking forward to him. I mean, I think they're going to start by him returning kicks so we can see his flashes and that athletic ability, I guess, just in the return game. But I think it's definitely going to take some time because he doesn't even know. They asked him, what's the biggest difference, between rugby and the NFL? He's like, well, there's plays. There's plays in the NFL, right? So he definitely has a big learning curve, but I think they're really banking on his athletic capability, and he can catch the ball really well. So I think he's a deep stash candidate, but looking at that contract situation, there where Pacheco's coming up, on his rookie contract, there's some world where Zamet may be the future at least third down back in Kansas City.
Naturally, the guy wearing a Kansas City Chiefs hat is going to go with
There you go.
yeah, there's the chop that we were talking about. Very good, Aaron. 40 minutes later.
There you go.
Yeah, he's definitely a raw lump of clay that needs a lot of seasoning, and it's going to take a lot of patience to see if he pans out. I think it's more likely than not he's probably a wasted roster spot for a year or two, and then a guy you move on from. But Ethan, do you have any more of a rosy outlook than I do on this guy?
I mean, he's not a bad guy to stash in your bench. The Chiefs use that international player pathway, so I believe they get some kind of roster exemptions with him. There's a lot of jargon when it comes to that, but the Chiefs are smart to use it. It gives NFL teams a chance to bring foreign athletes in and try to give them a shot. So I don't think it's a bad shot to stash. The kid's obviously a great athlete. He was a star on the rugby field. Aaron's hoping he's going to be a star for the Kansas City Chiefs.
We'll catch him on the gridiron and see how it pans out, folks. But that's what we have for all we have for this episode here. So we'll catch you all later. And until next time, folks. Peace.